Hey there folks, CrossFlux here with a random video. I haven't done anything like this before, and I don't plan on making this a trend on the channel or anything. Recently, I watched a video on YouTube titled, "Please Stop Being Mean to Kids' Movies." I've linked the video in the description as well. Please check it out for the full context of what I'm going to be talking about today. Also, I know I normally show my face for videos like this, but honestly, that would just take more time than I'm willing to spend on this video, so enjoy some random video game footage in the background. Red, aka RoboBuddies, is someone whose opinion I've always respected. I've watched Red's videos for a long time and have always enjoyed the content. This video is not going to be calling Red out or anything like that. My intentions are to address a few things that Red has talked about in the aforementioned video that I both agree and disagree with. This is a rebuttal video, basically. Again, I harbor absolutely no ill will towards Red, and I pray that I don't come across as confrontational, but respectful. Anyways, let's get on with what it is that I want to say. I'll be using specific clips from Red's video if I need to rebut a particular point, but for a quick summary of the video, Red is calling out certain movie reviewing YouTubers like I Hate Everything and Your Movie Sucks for being hypocritical and for reviewing kids' movies with an adult perspective. Basically, Red's point is that kids' movies should be reviewed and judged on a different level when compared to other movies. I heavily disagree with this, but I'll comment on that specifically a little later.
And that's the thing that I've realized over time. A story is more than just what happens in it. It's the journey, not the destination, and even if you know where things are going, you can still enjoy it. I mean, most any film, you know the heroes will probably make it out in the end. The tension doesn't come from if they'll make it out, but how they'll make it.
Very good point. This is also why tropes can work. I've always subscribed to the belief that every idea has already been done to death. Nothing is original anymore. What makes something unique is all the smaller details surrounding the base idea. What matters more is how well the story is executed.
Personally, at the core of it, I believe that a good story, or at least a story someone cared about, has something to say.
Once again, I agree for sure. Movies are art, and all art has something to say. The example you bring up about Illumination holds true. Technically, they do say something with their movies, but it's the most absolute basic message, like, be yourself. This is practically equivalent to saying nothing at all. It's inoffensive, so that it can appeal to as wide an audience as possible. It then turns into something that you're not supposed to think about. You're supposed to consume their movies with your brain turned off, and enjoy it as mindless entertainment. Now, I do think there is a place for mindless entertainment. Sometimes you just need to relax and enjoy something that makes you happy. I do this with magical girl shows. Whenever I'm having a super stressful day, I come home and put on an episode or two of the newest Pretty Cure show. But I can fully admit that these shows are similar to Illumination in that they're glorified key rings. What's the difference between Illumination and a parent jingling keys in front of their baby? I believe this is what can define a bad kids movie. Could it be replaced with jingling keys and have the same effect? If yes, then you've got yourself a bad kids film.
But while I agree that animation is not a kids' medium, we can't ignore the fact that a lot of media geared towards kids is animated. And so I believe the problem is that because animation is in such a weird spot right now, a lot of these critics try to rate kids' media on the same level as adult media.
This just seems like a weird way to say that kids' media should get a pass just because it's kids' media. Like, a kid's film doesn't need to be of the same quality since it's just made for kids. I don't think this is what you're going for, since I know you care about animation as an art form, but that's just the way your point comes across to me. Another thing is, what makes a film kids' media? A little later into your video, you start to talk about both Luca and Ratatouille, stating that Luca is for kids and that Ratatouille isn't. Personally, I'd still consider Ratatouille a kids' film. That doesn't make it any less good or complex, but it's a film that I could comfortably show a child and they'd enjoy it. So, what I'd consider kids' media is it appropriate for a child to view? If yes, then it's kids' media. Basically, don't have sex and excruciating violence, and you're good in my book. I understand this is probably just my opinion, but the point I'm trying to make here is it's important to outline what makes a film a kids' film when you're reviewing it.
And yes, I agree that we should be critical of media we show to our children, but they fail to acknowledge that films can be written with a certain audience in mind, not to pander to them, but because they want something to be shown to them.
You hit the nail on the head here. The audience of the movie is important to consider.
Because I believe that these movies need to be rated on different scales. Just because a film doesn't have huge stakes or complex themes doesn't mean they're dumb or lazy.
But I disagree with the conclusion that you draw. Yes, Luke and Ratatouille are two different movies, but that doesn't mean they need to be rated on two different scales. This is basically the same thing as giving the movie a free pass. I mean, what's the point of rating a film anyways, if everything gets its own scale? You even state in your video that you don't want movies to receive a free pass. Let's take a physical measurement, for example. A ruler objectively measures 12 inches of distance, or a foot. No matter what you're measuring, you can use a ruler to determine how long it is. If instead of using a ruler, I used my own personal measuring device, say a stick that just so happens to be as long as my own foot, what would that accomplish? I could still measure a chair with it, sure, but would that mean anything to you if I said, this chair is precisely 6 CrossFlux feet tall? I have big feet, okay? Probably not. This is because, from your point of view, the length of my foot seems subjective. Unless you really know me, you won't have a good understanding of how big a single unit of CrossFlux feet is. Thus, when I measure a chair and claim it's 6 CF feet tall, you can't really picture it in your head. So, by using the same logic, if you were to rate a kids' movie and a more mature movie on separate scales, how would you be able to properly compare and contrast them? I suppose an argument could be made that one shouldn't compare these types of movies to one another in the first place, but that just isn't satisfying to me. The point of rating a movie in the first place is to determine if it's good or not. Now, obviously with movies being art, there is a level of subjectivity in play here. Every reviewer has their own biases, but at the heart of the review, there should be objective qualities that are looked at in determining how good or bad a film is. I touch on this in my own review of video games, specifically my review of World to the West. Thus, my solution to reviewing vastly different types of movies, such as a rom-com against a horror film, is to use a system that looks at each aspect of the movie in an objective manner, while taking into consideration the audience and intent of the creator. Having this one, all-encompassing system is important because rating a subject would mean absolutely nothing if we're just using different systems. Another example is comparing the hardness of objects. The most common way to measure the hardness of wood is through the Jonka test. A metal's hardness is more commonly measured using the Rockwell test. These two tests are different, thus their results can't be directly compared to one another. You can't properly compare the hardness of white oak wood, 1350, and copper alloy, 55. If you were to do this, it'd look like white oak is way harder than copper, and that's simply not true.
Luca has a huge amount of love put into it. I'm sorry, but I just can't see how a movie with that much care put into it is just a bunch of disposable cookie-cutter products.
Are you trying to say that if a movie has love put into it, that contributes to it being good? Once again, I disagree. Look at The Room, for example. That film had nothing but love put into it. Tommy Wiseau tried his best, but it just wasn't enough. Almost every aspect of that movie is an outright failure. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It's still an enjoyable movie, in that so bad it's good kind of way. But it's still an objectively bad film. It's an example of how not to make a film. Look at my terrible drawings of potential Pokemon designs for my Sword and Shield prediction video. Sorry audience, I know I promised never to show these again, but it's important. It may be hard to believe, but I legitimately put love and effort into these pictures. I just suck that bad at drawing. These drawings are not good, just because I cared for them. Now, I haven't seen Luca, but one thing I do know is that that film isn't good just because the creator put a lot of love into the project. It may be a good film for many other reasons, just not that one.
I just can't agree with that mindset, and I think it's pretty unfair to judge a movie so harshly when it clearly wasn't made for you. I'm not saying just turn your brain off. The exact opposite, actually. I'm asking you to think about who the movie is for and judge it based on that instead of holding it to a standard it wasn't even trying to meet.
Again, reviewers always have their own biases, but yes, I do agree with you here. It's a reviewer's job to set aside these biases as much as they possibly can, and to review a product as objectively and fairly as possible. Even if a movie isn't for a reviewer, they should still be able to highlight what made it good and what made it bad. They should be able to recognize the skill and themes that went into that product. Take me for example. Again, I review video games, and I certainly have my own biases. I tend to prefer 2D platformers and JRPGs, but I can be very picky about the ones that I like. One of the most acclaimed 2D platforming series out there is the Donkey Kong Country series. People adore these games, but I personally can't stand them. I hate playing them so much, but I wouldn't rate these as terrible games. I can recognize that they're just not for me. Despite being 2D platformers, I really hate the feel of the Kongs, as well as the level design. Other people love the floaty yet clunky feel, so the controls aren't inherently bad, it's just a personal taste sort of thing. Thus, I can't in good faith hold those controls against the game. In fact, the game is built around the control scheme that they've decided to go with, so the controls are actually excellent. It's just not something that I personally care for. So, to summarize my points, if I've understood you correctly, your biggest problem is that you feel some reviewers like IHE are unfair towards kids' media because it's not made for them. I can respect that sentiment. Your solution seems to be rating kids' movies on a different scale, and this is where my opinions differ. Again, using video games as a vehicle of explanation, since this is my area of expertise, many games may have different genres, but that doesn't mean that they get their own scale for review. One should simply factor that genre into their reasoning. For example, telling a story in an RPG requires a different approach than telling a story in a psychological horror game. It would be bad writing to tell your RPG story like it were a psychological horror, and vice versa. The same goes for considering the audience of films. When kids' media has a simple story, it's not actually bad storytelling. The story is specifically designed in a way that allows its target audience to understand and digest its meaning. It's up to the reviewer to keep this in the back of their mind throughout the review. So I do agree, many kids' movies receive harsher reviews than they deserve, but I disagree that they need their own scale of measurement. So I think that's everything I wanted to say. Red, if you're seeing this and have made it this far, thanks so much for listening to my opinion. I truly respect yours, and I think you've brought up a lot of interesting points. Also, thanks for your obscure cookie run video from years ago. That video is the reason I even know about the game, and it's still one of my favorite games to this day. So for that, I owe you. For everyone else, I also hope you enjoyed my rambling. If any of you have anything to add to this discussion, please feel free to do so in the comments below. As always, please remain respectful. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you guys in the next video, whatever it may be.